So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I'll begin. We have 11 participants. I'm just going to put this to the side because I have to admit people one by one. So I'll be going back and forth between my slides and admitting people in. But as we begin, we'll be talking about mental wellness, managing our mental health during COVID-19. For those of you that may not know me, my name is Shakil Mirza, and I graduated from York University in psychology. And currently, I'm going to complete my master's in public health from Queens by the end of this year, inshallah. So just to sort of give a structure in this presentation, we'll begin with our introduction about mental health. Some of this may be review for some of you, but it's a good refresher. We'll talk about navigating our mental health through COVID-19, the Islamic perspective on mental health, and some of the resources that I'll be presenting to you. I know we talk a lot about mental health, but in the case of a crisis or in the case that we do need to access resources, what do we have for our utilization? So in the beginning, I would like to share this quote by Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu, who speaks, who's written this quote from The Way of Seekers. So this says, the relationship with fellow men is divided into two branches. One, that the relationship with one's own self, as the Holy Prophet clearly said, yourself has claims on you, and the relationship with fellow creatures. So this may not be, you may not understand what this quote means by Hazrat al-Muslim Maud, but inshallah in the next few slides later on we'll be speaking about this and touching back on this and why this is critical. So what is mental health? Mental health is a defined natural state of well-being in which individuals realize his or her own potential and that can cope with normal stresses of life and can work productively and fruitfully and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So mental health has different components to it, and it is with us all our life. This stigma or notion that mental health is only for some people is a wrong notion. Everybody has mental health, and we'll be speaking more on how that looks like. So mental health comes from this framework that we have in front of us. Mental health can be seen as a continuum model. So just like our physical health, where we can be unhealthy or healthy, but in between there's different factors of what is healthy. One can be obese, or one can be very skinny, or and even that extreme of skinniness, it has also its implications, and that is also an extreme form, which is also an illness. But seeing the same thing occur in mental health is the same sort of formula. So when we see healthy mental health, we see that an individual has normal fluctuations in mood. So an individual has normal sleep patterns, has full energy, but on the opposite end, poor mental health is someone who has anxiety or has levels of anxiety where the person is unable to cope, where the person is staying up all night, so anything that you consider a dysfunction in your life, your daily activities, that is considered poor mental health, where you sleep or where you get lack of sleep and it's impairing your daily activities. You wake up late for school, you wake up late for work, you're getting to work late, you're not able to get your work done on time. So that could be of sleep, or you're just physically exhausted, actually. Even though you are not being physically active, you still feel this physical fatigue. That's also a symptom of poor mental health. And so at that case, one should be seeking professional help. So some risk factors, for those of you that may not know, risk factors refer to those variables in our life that we that occurs to almost everyone, that everyone's exposed to, but it heightens our level of poor mental health. So it deteriorates our mental health. So some risk factors are, or bigger concepts we can look at as trauma, biology or physical health, and social determinants of health. So what do we mean by trauma? Trauma is traumatic experiences that negatively impact our life. So this isn't talked much about in our circles, but it's something that we need to address, especially in our community. A lot of our Ahmadi brothers that come to this country come from a place that has a lot of heightened risk of just being Ahmadi, of just being living in a very poor country, just living in utter fear. So whether that fear of persecution, that fear of our visa status, some of our Ahmadi brothers go through a lot of traumatic experiences that they may not talk about, and that is a risk factor that that can cause poor mental health. Now, if I want to give an example, is let's say you take an Ahmadi brother that has faced persecution in Pakistan, so has lived in utter fear, has been persecuted, and then went to a country like Sri Lanka or Thailand. And in Thailand, I've heard, especially with my own mamu, he was put in jail because of his status, legal status. And so he also faced a jail time for about 10 days. But other khudam that I've seen, there was one father who was in jail for 3 years in Thailand and before coming here to Canada. And so those are traumatic experiences that some of our Ahmadi brothers are face, and that's something that we need to acknowledge and also talk about, that these are some of the traumatic experiences that can heighten poor mental health and gives a underlying reason of why some of our brothers might be going through what they go through. Physical health, biology, sometimes poor physical health, whether we're either obese, whether we are bad eating habits, or just simply having a history of poor mental health in our family, or a history of chronic illnesses, whether that's diabetes or some other form of disability, can also affect our mental health. And lastly, social determinants of health. When we talk about our environment, our external environment, there's things like education, unemployment. And right now we're facing, some of our brothers are facing unemployment. And so sitting at home in isolation, that could also heighten our poor mental health. So that's something in our community that we need to be wary of. Secondly, what are the signs and impact of poor mental health? Now, I've left this blank, and any brother that would like to share what are some of the signs that they see in poor mental health. It's okay if you don't know. For those that want to chime in, feel free to unmute yourself and just go ahead and share any sign or any impact of poor mental health. So this was a way for Khudam to...
I guess
yes,
not able to bring clarity in your thoughts, what you are trying to say and communicate to others. And in your mind, you are quite clear what you want to say, but unable to communicate it to others and have better understanding from their end.
Exactly, Jazakallah Muzaffar Bhai. So mental health, there's three sort of components that regulate our mental health. It's our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors. And so when any of those sort of, that triangle, we sort of can't find synchronization or find our thoughts, behaviors, or action harmoniously, then it does cause poor mental health when there's a disassociation between the three. Rizwan Bhai says it can be anything. It could anything in our, when we were talking about our social determinants of health, it could be literally anything in our environment. And some of those that are listed here are eating and sleeping, low to no energy, feeling numb, feeling like nothing matters, feeling hopeless. Some of our actions that are exhibited due to poor mental health is smoking, drinking, drugs. We know that because of this pandemic, there's been a spike in opioid and overdoses across the country. So some of the public health practitioners say that this is a pandemic in itself. And some other things that have been an issue that's been exacerbated because of the pandemic is also domestic violence at home. So there's a lot of chaos at home. And that's because due to like loss of connection with family members, poor relationships, and that's also due to poor mental health as well. We know that those people that have been hurt in their younger life, or those that have a lot of traumatic experiences that they haven't dealt with, that leads on, and that also leads on to your next life or your next family. And so hurt people, there's a saying, hurt people hurt people. So it's this meaning of cycle of abuse that happens. So that's been also exacerbated during the pandemic. And so mood swings is also another one. Hearing voices or believing things. This is also a symptom of not just poor mental health, but also a schizoaffective disorder. So people that have traumatic experiences, whether it's abuse or whether it's loss of life that they've experienced or something traumatic, it could ring a bell. It could bring back these memories of unconsciousness. Something to be something concrete to share is that a lot during the Syrian crisis in 2015, a lot of the Syrian kids that when they came to Canada and they were sitting in the classroom, when they heard the bell ring, either for recess or a period change, they started crying or they started having anxiety. Is because their unconscious memories of the wartime and the bombs in Syria, it brought back memories when this bells were ringing. And so this is an example of kids hearing things or being scared. So that's also an indicative factor of poor mental health. So now we've spoken about sort of mental health in general. Now let's move on to something specific during our period of COVID-19. How do we manage? What are some strategies, coping mechanisms? And so I'll be also asking Khudam what they've been doing during COVID-19 to sort of manage their wellness. So during some feelings that people have been having for COVID is that feeling of self-doubt, feeling of self-isolation, feelings of worthlessness. Because a lot of times we as men, our worth is tied to our productivity, whether we can work, gain income, provide for our families. These are inherent as for us as men. And so when we aren't able to sort of accomplish this, then we've been having these feelings, and these are natural. So as long as it doesn't affect your day-to-day activities to the point where whatever normal behavior you have because of this pandemic, you've started becoming incorporating abnormal behaviors, then that's something, a cause of concern. But other than that, those feelings are inherent and those feelings are normal. So some strategies. Let's talk about some strategies for our Khudam brothers. I'm really interested to hear what we've been doing during this pandemic. So just a question for everyone. What strategies have you been doing to keep well, whether at home or just in your personal life, physical life? Please do share.
So, Shakil Saib, Assalamu alaikum, Zahid here.
Welcome, salam, Jizad bhai.
So, one thing that, again, one thing we're definitely taught from a very young age is, namaz helps and all, connection with Allah Ta'ala. But one aspect, not from a spiritual perspective, but more from a physical perspective that I've been trying to do with my family, for instance, is trying to go for a walk. So around 5 o'clock every evening, we try to go for a walk, and it's a time. And my son started riding a bike, so he'd be on a bike, and just looking at that and engaging with him, it makes me feel happy.
Jazakallah for sharing that, Zaid Bhai. Definitely spending quality family time and improving our relationships is something that is commendable, and definitely um, something that improves our mental health and just well-being. Jazakallah for sharing that. Is there any other brother that would like to share anything? So Jazakallah, Abid Bhai, and
I have a question.
yes, go ahead.
When you said like hearing things, it's not normal. Can you elaborate it, please?
Sure. So when you there's a certain level of normal behavior where you may hear things that could possibly be realistic. So for example, if a pencil were to fall, if I'm sitting in my room and a pencil were to fall somewhere else in my room and I heard that, and someone else can also in my family attest to, yes, a pencil fell and I did hear that, then that is something real. If, for example, an individual, and that's normal behavior, abnormal behavior or an abnormal symptom would be something like someone hearing things or someone feeling like they're being taught to, but that is someone else cannot attest to that. And that's something where only the individual knows. And this isn't just one common thing. It's to the point where it's repeat behavior. So these are called hallucinations. But according to clinical
Are
guidelines,
being delusional, right?
pardon?
Are being delusional?
Yes, delusions, hallucinations. Now, in order for that to be diagnosed as something like of schizophrenia or some sort of disorder, it would have to be longer than 2 weeks, where it would be consistent. Then it would be considered something as a disorder. But that is one symptom of schizophrenia, of a psychoaffective disorder where someone has hallucinations or delusions. Jazakallah Saran Bhai. So we'll move on because we're short on time. So before I share some of the strategies that I put together, I want to bring attention to Khudam, a framework that we look at in psychology, and that's called the locus of control. So when it comes to our mental health, we have to accept that there's some things that are totally out of our control, and there's some things that are totally in our control. So some things that are out of our control are in this blue circle. So political moves, weather, traffic jams, wars, celebrities, what they do. So these are things that are totally out of our control. And but this shouldn't be something that we need to accept that we have no control over. Some things that else which we have no control over is sort of what other people say. In our culture, there's the saying of "lo kya kenge," and so we have no control of what other people say about us. And so this also affects our mental health as well, because some people do dwell on what other people say about them. And so this is something that we need to be mindful of, is that is whatever you have control over, whether that's your relationships, your weight, your sort of your mindfulness, your ability to retain information, that's something that you can grow. That's something you can have control over and also sort of take lead on. And so we should be grateful for the things that we can have control over, because that is the thing that stays with us the most or the longest. So that's to give you an example of right now in the midst of the pandemic, a lot of people are anxious. They don't have work. A lot of people are anxious because there's no vaccine out there. They're gonna catch the coronavirus. So we have no, in our personal capacity, we don't have control over the deaths or cases of coronavirus, but we do have control over of our behavior, of how we stay safe, how we keep our families safe. So that's something to keep in mind during this pandemic, is to dwell on what you can control and leave the rest to Allah of what we can't control. So some of the strategies that a lot of the brothers brought up, I'm going to bring up here, is spirituality. So Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Ayyadullah bin Aziz has spoken at length for the past 6 months about improving our spirituality, whether that's praying 5 times namaz, praying on time, praying with our family in congregational prayer, the Jummah prayer to be exact. A lot of people are working from home, so be mindful that we're doing all these things at home. A lot of times, pre-COVID, we had this normal statement of saying we don't have enough time, or we're spending so much time away from home that we're not able to sort of do all these things. So just to share is that Hazur has said that we should be mindful of the time that we have now, more time due to COVID, to ourselves. We should be mindful of our spirituality. New experiences. So some strategies to improve our mental health include new experiences. So my friends, they've taken up going on nature walks. My friend went to Court the Lakes with his wife for a stay at an Airbnb for a weekend, and that was his first time experience living out in the wilderness and going on nature walks. So if you are married, if you don't have kids, and you still want to go out during this COVID time, I know if you go north in Ontario, you can find some nature sort of scenery. So do find out what new experiences that you didn't have time for before COVID, and see if you can sort of take that opportunity right now. Exercise and sleep is really important for our mental health. Try to get a minimum 6 hours of sleep. Ideally, it's 8, but 6 to 8 is the buffer period of what is normal functioning for people. Anything less than that is definitely indicative of someone with poor mental health. Less than 6 hours is definitely something that is concerning. If not now, then sometime in the near future, because it will catch up to you if you don't get enough sleep. Relationships. So speaking on relationships, try to improve your relationships at home with your kids, your siblings, with your family. I know Abid Bhai shared that he's been doing group calls with his family to stay in touch. If you have family members away in another country, my sister lives in America. She can't visit here, so we do FaceTime her as much as we can. So that's definitely something you should be mindful of during COVID. Also, just maybe reconnecting with old classmates. I was going through my sort of university pictures, and I came across pictures of my old friends, and I sent it to my friends saying, hey, remember these old pictures? And it was a way for me to sort of start a conversation with my old buddies. And I think now that during this COVID, we can talk about the virus, how we're staying healthy with our family, what things we've been doing. So these are conversation starters we can start with our old buddies. So that's a tip for those that are thinking, what can they do? What are some strategies? Journaling. So that's something that's personal to me. I don't have really good memory at all. So during my sort of days, I do journal. At the end of the week, I write what I did, what I came across, some of the conversations that left an imprint on me, some things that I came across that were interesting to me. I write that down as a journal, as a form of sort of keeping track of my weeks, because a lot of times people have said that because of coronavirus, all the days are the same. And some people during the middle of the pandemic couldn't remember whether it was a Monday or a Thursday. So journaling, for those that want to write, for those that have the willingness or ability to, it's a good strategy, because it sort of keeps you grateful of the everyday that you've been living. You keep track of what you've done. You know, if I were to look back in my journal in January 17, 2020, I'll be able to figure out where I was January 17, 2020. And I think I remember I was coming back from the trip with Hazur. All the AMSA students went to visit Hazur in January. And so that was something that left an imprint on me, and I wrote it down. And if I were to, I may not remember the nitty details right now, but if I were to look back in my journal, I would remember some of the conversations I had with people that I wrote down, or some of the things that I've had with people. So journaling is something that you can consider. Also, new skills. So a lot of my friends have been doing this. One of my friends took up photography. He bought a camera and he started taking pictures at nighttime. Another skill was my other friend built a home gym because the gyms are closed now. So he went to Home Depot, he built a gym in his backyard, and him and his brother are working out together during this time. So think about what you can do. And also cooking is something that is maybe accessible to everybody at home. Try to, think of new recipes or look up YouTube and help your family at home with the cooking or doing the house chores. So those are also strategies to keep up during the COVID. And the three things on the right that I posted is sort of an idea that you should, a framework that you should have for yourself. Keep a structure in your life. A lot of people are facing anxiety because they don't have structure in their life. Monday and Thursday is the same day. They can't tell the time of day. So keep a structure, keep goals in your life. During COVID, what do you want to do? I personally want to finish my my master's in December and hopefully find a job in January. That is my goal, and I'm working towards that. Once you set goals in your life, especially goals right now, then you'll be able to work towards it. So everyone should have some sort of personal goal. That way you're not at home in pity or isolation. And self-care. So when we're talking about the first quote in the beginning by Hazrat al-Muslim Maud Raziyallahu anhu, he says that the relationship with a fellow man is divided into two: the relationship that he has with himself and the relationship he has with his fellow creatures. What does that mean? So a lot of times we don't speak about this, but how you view yourself is how you view others. If you view yourself as a optimistic person, someone with potential, someone with that can achieve their goals and be kind and help others when others are down, then you'll also see that in others. And you'll also see that in the relationships you have with others. You wouldn't be a pessimist in the relationship. You wouldn't be someone who drags other people for the sake of your own sort of glory or things like that. So that, if you view yourself, is how you view others. And self-care also means that when you are having a bad day, you are able to acknowledge that, number one, and number two is that you're able to do something about it. A lot of times people face burnout at work, people face stress, so much so that they physically become ill. This is what we call burnout, is when your stress symptoms become so much that you physically become ill, whether it's fever, a cold, fatigue. I know when people have fatigue or fever, they also have body aches. So the body aches could be also an accumulation of stress that you've never addressed. So self-care means that you can slow down, you can acknowledge that you're having a bad day, a bad week. You can acknowledge that something bad or negative you've experienced in your past week, and you're able to say, okay, what can I do for myself to make myself better? And self-care can be the smallest of things. It could mean like taking yourself out for a nightly drive, but alone, or going out with family to eat, or it could be going on a walk with your wife and kids. So self-care means that your personal you have a personal sort of toolkit that when you are experiencing a bad day, you can say, slow down. This is what I'm going to do to make myself better. And inshallah, tomorrow, I won't carry over that negative experience on to my next day. And the next day, I'll have a totally fresh day. So that's how we should consider ourselves day to day. Don't stretch out a bad day into a bad week, and don't stretch out a bad week into a bad month. So the Islamic perspective. So we have a few minutes left, and I'll jump into it. So we know from the Islamic perspective that mental health is addressed in Islam, and that is actually from the states of man. So if I would highly encourage the brothers to read the philosophy of the teaching of Islam, the nafs amara, nafs lawama, nafs mutmainna. these states of man are spiritual states. Now, just like we do wuzu, physical cleanliness to be spiritually cleansed, our bodies or our physical capacities also have an influence on our spiritual states. So that's something that we need to be mindful of, is that our physical states, we have a sort of duty to tend to our physical bodies, that this body that we've been given by Allah Ta'ala, we have a duty to take care of it. And the reason we have a duty to take care of it is because when we take care of the vessel, then when we take care of the shell, then the vessel inside is also taken care of. So everyone knows nafs amara is the heart that sort of fulfills its carnal desires, and we can see that right now in the world, that people are just slaving away, that everything that closed down outside in the world, sort of the clubs, the restaurants, the amusement parks, people that wanted to fulfill their desires just by going out, hanging out with friends, now they're not content because they're in their isolation of their homes, and they're thinking that, whatever I wanted to do, whatever my daily activities were out there, they're all closed, and now I have nothing to do. So they were just going about their day, eating, sleeping, drinking. That's nafs amara. Nafs lawama is the one that entices us to evil. We do good, but we still fall back, and that's where a lot of us are. And so this is the state that we can now take reflection on during COVID, and understand that, what can I do to attain peace? Allah Ta'ala says that verily in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find peace. So what can we do? What are some strategies spiritually that we can take to reach from nafs lawama to nafs mutmainna, the soul at rest? So the key takeaway is our physical body has a influence on our spiritual body. So now we'll be listening to Hazur give an answer. And
one question
we
I
have
asked,
enough
how
time to
righteous
watch this
and
all.
prayerful people
So,
deal with symptoms
so
of
inshallah, we'll
depression.
watch this.
अल्लाह ताला से ताल्लुक करीब है आपके ख्याल में, इसलिए कि वो लोग
Assalamu alaikum. We cannot hear the audio because you have muted yourself.
दूर जाएगा, बाहर
Jazakallah.
निकलेगा, कोई चैन नहीं किसी करवट होता, दोनों में फर्क है थोड़ा सा। एक लोगों को भी घबराहट होती है, और उनको इसलिए होती है कि इतने सपोर्ट जो उनके अल्लाह ताला ने काम किए हुए हैं वो किस तरह होंगे, या किस तरह लोग शैतान के चंगुल से आज़ाद हो सकते हैं। तो वो बावजूद उसके दुआएं भी करते हैं। वो हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम जंग बदर में अल्लाह ताला ने तसल्ली दिला दी थी ना कि तुम जंग जीतनी है, फिक्र ना करो। उसके बावजूद बेचैन हो के दुआ कर रहे थे, और इतनी शिद्दत से दुआ करते थे जिसमें मिलता था कि चादर ढक जाती थी। हज़रत बकर ने वो क्या कहा था, यही कहा था ना कि अल्लाह ताला ने जब वादा किया तो परेशानी किस चीज़ की है, घबराहट कैसी है। मुझे पता नहीं अल्लाह ताला की मख्फी बातें होती हैं, पता नहीं रिक्वायरमेंट सारी मुसलमानों पूरी करते हैं कि नहीं, जिससे अल्लाह ताला ने फतह लिखी हुई है। तो ऐसी सूरतें पैदा होती हैं। लेकिन एक डिप्रेशन ये होता है कि आइसोलेट हो जाता है इंसान, फिर वो अल्लाह को ही भूल जाता है। वो सिर्फ सारा दिन उसको रोने होता है, उसको यही है कि बस अल्लाह भी कोई नहीं, नमाजों में कोई फायदा नहीं, खाने पीने में कोई फायदा नहीं, अल्लाह बैठे रहो कमरे में बंद रहो, बस यूं गुमसुम रहो। वो असल डिप्रेशन है, ठीक है। वो नेक लोगों में इस तरह पैदा नहीं होता, और अगर होता है तो उसका मतलब उनकी बातें सही नहीं, उनका ताल्लुक अल्लाह ताला से सही नहीं है।
प्यारे सूरज इस सिलसिले में फिर कौन सी दुआ करनी चाहिए, क्या अल्लाह ताला से किस तरह इसके मदद?
अल्लाह ताला ने कुरान से कहा अला बिज़िक्रिल्लाह तत्मइनुल कुलूब, कि अल्लाह ताला के जिक्र करो और इत्मीनान कल्ब हासिल करो। और लोग डॉक्टर्स ये भी कहते हैं कि अमूमन जो हार्ट के मरीज हैं उनको सुबह के वक्त ज़्यादा अर्ली मॉर्निंग सहरी के वक्त होता है ना, हार्ट अटैक होते हैं। तो जो लोग तहज्जुद पढ़ने वाले हैं वो उस फेज में से उसको गुजर रहे होते हैं, वज़ू की या नमाज पढ़ी तो उमूमन उनमें जो है हार्ट अटैक का रेशो वो बहुत कम है। ठीक है, तो एक ये भी इससे साबित होता है कि सुबह अर्ली उठना, तहज्जुद पढ़ना, नमाज पढ़ना ये भी इस बीमारी को दूर करती है। तो इसके अलावा अल्लाह ताला का जिक्र है, अल्लाह ताला से दुआ मांगना है, अल्लाह ताला का भी झुकना है। बाकी ये जो इंसानी नफ्सियात है या इंसानी बीमारियां हैं या जो बशरी तकाज़े हैं वो तो हर एक के साथ लगे हुए, चाहे वो नबी हो या वली हो या आम आदमी हो, कोई भी हो उसके साथ लगे हैं, बशर तो है ना। तो चीज़ें सारी साथ साथ हैं, इसलिए एक इलाज तो यही है कि अल्लाह का जिक्र करो। दूसरा इलाज ये है कि इंसानियत की खिदमत के लिए आगे निकल के आओ। तीसरा इलाज ये है कि घर में भी अपने मजलिस में आओ, मैंने भी बयान जिस तरह किया था, और बाहर भी लोगों में घुलो फिरो। फिर अमूमन जो डिप्रेशन के मरीज होते हैं या रोने को ही दिल चाहता है, उनके जो पीक होती है उनके डिप्रेशन की अमूमन कहा जाता है कि 11-12 बजे के करीब होती है। उस वक्त उनको बाहर निकल जाना चाहिए, इधर सैर करनी चाहिए, खुली हवा में जाएं, फिजा में जाएं, ताज़ा हवा लें। ठीक है, बहुत सारे डिप्रेशन के मरीज मैंने देखे हैं, होता है और रो रो के बुरा हाल होता है, लेकिन अल्लाह ताला से दुआ की, अल्लाह ताला ने उस फेज में से उनको निकाल दिया। सालों गुजर गए हैं, कोई बीमारी का नामो निशान भी नहीं। तो अलावा इसके बस दवाइयाँ भी बात खाते हैं, साइकाट्रिस्ट देते हैं दवाइयाँ, वो खा लेनी चाहिए बात तो डिप्रेशन से गुजारने के लिए। आजकल तो दुनियादारी के जैसे कुछ ज़्यादा भी हो गया डिप्रेशन, तो उस फेज में से जब निकल जाएं तो फिर आस्ता आस्ता ठीक हो जाते हैं लोग।
Jazakallah Hasan al-Jaza. Shakil Sahib, we'll continue with your presentation, my brother. But before that, I just want to make an announcement or two for our live viewers on YouTube. Inshallah ta'ala, in a few minutes, we'll be having a presentation on fitness, basically during COVID, given the pandemic, a number of gyms and facilities that brothers used to use to keep up with fitness have closed down. So how do we now tackle that scenario as well? So we have our brother Daud Sahib who's joined us as well, and he'll be walking through that workshop and engaging our Khuddam brothers on this particular Zoom chat that we're on. In the parallel, we have another workshop that's happening right now on marriage. And shortly, we will be switching to that on the live YouTube link. So we didn't want to make it abrupt. So we just want brothers to know that. And then we'll come back as soon as the marriage workshop is done to our brother Daud Bhai on live. However, the presentation will start momentarily. Jazakallah. Over to you, Shakil Bhai.
So I just want to recap what Hazur said. There's some beautiful points. One thing is that there's this notion that people have, and historically this notion's been actually continuing, is that those that have mental health issues seem to also are not religious enough. So religiosity and mental health, or religiosity and psychology, they're not intertwined 100 simultaneously. You cannot make the correlation that someone who has poor mental health is probably due to his irreligiosity. What Hazur is saying is that those who have poor mental health, they won't have the capacity, or they won't be able to fulfill their spiritual potential. And so they may be fulfilling their Islamic duties with their poor mental health, but because of their poor mental health, they won't be able to achieve the full fulfillment of is like the whole Islamic their whole Islamic practice. You know, they could be reading 3 times namaz, but because they're not falling asleep, or they're falling asleep throughout the day, they're missing out during the middle of the namazes, or they're missing out on Fajr because they're sleeping through Fajr. So it's a wrong notion that we hold, that there's a correlation. There isn't a correlation per se, but there is an influence on one over the other. So what we can say is that do look after your mental health, do look after your physical health, because this influences your spiritual health. So lastly, we're going to speak on resources. So those brothers that you might come across, or yourself, that are facing poor mental health, or just want someone to speak that's going through a bad phase, because your poor mental health's not forever. Tough times don't last, tough people do. And so in the Jamaat, if you come across a khadim, number one, try and get him connected with the guide. If the guide is compassionate, he'll be an open ear. He'll be actually thankful that the khadim is opening up to him, and the guide will definitely be someone who will address or find a way to address the problems. Secondly, in our Jamaat, we have our Murabbiyan. Our Murabbiyan are trained with the limited training that they have through Jamia and through experiences of dealing with other people's situations, that they can also speak to Khudam. If you come across a khadim that's high risk in their mental health, that's been prolonged for many years due to sort of all these external factors that we've discussed, two Muslim organizations that I can attest to that I've worked for and worked with. So Nasiha is a Muslim mental health helpline. And the helpline is here, 1-866-627-3342. I've worked as a counselor, and I've worked over the phone line speaking to Muslim youth that have mental health issues. I can attest to them. If someone wants somebody to speak to, completely anonymous, Nasiha doesn't know who the name of the khadim is, who the name of the sister is. If you want to pass this along to any of the sisters in our Jamaat, there's also a text line, so you can text to the number. Between that, and no one will know who you are, and you don't need to share your name or your identification or any of your backgrounds. So you can check out nasiha.org. I've worked for them, so I can attest to them. They are working professionals. And number two is Khalil Center. So Khalil Center is funded solely through donations, and they are a completely professional psychotherapy organization. So they have Muslim professionals that are psychotherapists by nature, and they work with Muslim couples, either through couples or through individuals, with a wide range of how do you say issues. So it could be your mental health issue, depression. It could be maternal mental health. So some of the women that face depression due to after giving birth, postpartum depression. Some of the couples that have issues between sort of in their marriage, they can go to this and they can receive therapy or counseling through certified Muslim counselors, and they're 100% non-sectarians. So it doesn't matter if you're Shia, Ahmadi, Ismaili. They completely give therapy with an Islamic lens, but it isn't sort of based on sect. And lastly, so you can note those two things down if you'd like, Nasiha and the Khalil Center. This is in Ontario, but Nasiha, for those of the Khudam brothers that are outside of Ontario, the phone line is all over. We got calls from America, from like India, England to this phone line. So definitely you can call the toll-free number if you're not from Ontario, if you're from BC or Nova Scotia. Lastly, on Instagram, there's these resources that I personally like to use. One is called the Depression Project. It gives you a whole list of resources. Every post talks about mental health. Wellness Psychotherapy Services is also on Instagram. They're a really good page. Your Mind Matters.org is a really good page on Instagram. CAMH, if you feel like you have someone in your family or you yourself are experiencing issues longer than 2 weeks that you know for a fact that you need a diagnosis, speak to your doctor. and have them refer you to a psychiatrist or psychologist at CAMH. They definitely help. And lastly, Code of Living. He's a khadim from Brampton, Guide Sab Brampton, Usman Hamid. He's been running this website for the past 10 years. So there's been a khadim in our Jamaat that's been has been sharing his own personal website on personal development and mental health for the past 10 years since he was in high school. So this is a really good resource for those that want to sort of just check up on a website. This is called codeofliving.com. So go ahead and check it out. And I think that's the end of my presentation. We're kind of over time, but if anyone has any questions, I do have a minute or two if Zaid Bhai permits.
Are there any questions, brothers?
So you can use the chat feature, or you can use, you can unmute yourself. I think we have a couple of minutes until 12:35.
It was a wonderful presentation. I just want to confirm, I had one question. I usually hear from people that if you become somehow very angry, you should drink water. If you're standing, sit down or lay down. So is that true, and how is that helpful?
It is true. So Alhamdulillah, like the Holy Prophet ﷺ has told us this 1400 years ago, and science now is saying that the cooling properties of water is when someone becomes angry, they become their blood sort of blood pressure rises, so their body becomes internally heated, and so water has cooling properties. So when we drink water is when we cool ourselves. So it is an immediate sort of counter reaction to when we become angry. But you're right, Dar Rahman Bhai, that it is valid and definitely works till this day and age. Rizwan Bhai says, "Are you personally from Wan Jamaat?" I live in Mississauga, but the GTA is very small, so we all live close by. I guess if someone wants to ever reach out to me, I don't have my details, but you can contact me at shak.mirza24@gmail.com, or you can take down my phone number and email me if you, or contact me if you want to speak anything in private, 100% confidential, anonymous. You can call me at 416. Sorry, text me at 416-625. 7647.
Jazakallah, Shakil Sahib. That was an amazing presentation and very enlightening. Jazakumullah Sanal Jaza for that.